This one image almost caused a World War III on all fronts. On August 4th, 1990, deep in the Scottish town of Callvine, a strange 100-foot craft was seen by two English casual workers during an evening hike. And what they captured on their camera haunted the UFO community and the world at large for decades. To date, it still remains the best proof of UFO existence. And the reason you don't know about it is because the British military worked extra hard to hide this information for 30 years. But now, I not only have proof of this image's existence that the British hid for more than 30 years, but I also have proof of how this UFO image almost caused a war. The mystery of aliens and UFOs has been around for about a century or more, but they never make announcements when they are about to visit. This is why when two English men stepped out of a nearby hotel at about 9 p.m. on the 4th of August, 1990, they were unprepared for what they were about to see. They were casual workers, most likely visitors who were dishwashers in that hotel and looking to make some extra cash. After their evening shift that day, the duo took a short drive around the town. This was Callvine, somewhere in Scotland in the United Kingdom. They soon alighted and decided to take a short hike. They must have prepared for some sightseeing, as one of them carried a camera with him. It was a little late, but not entirely dark. This meant anyone could easily discern objects or people walking around. As they got out of the car to embark on their hike, they came across a fenced-off area. The area looked quite deserted and should have made the two men return to their place of work, but it did not. Instead, it piqued their curiosity, and they made their way to the quartered-off area. As they walked across the area, looking for something interesting, they came to a clearing. One of the men trailed behind a little bit as his partner, who seemed more curious, went ahead of him. Suddenly, he froze. His eyes had fallen upon something that scared him to his English boots. The second man soon caught up with him and found his partner transfixed on the spot. As he followed his gaze, he noticed that he was looking up into the clouds, and then he saw it as well. Just a few meters above the ground was a diamond-shaped object. Its appearance was weird and nothing like the two men had ever seen. It had no discernible fuselage, wings, or any known plane parts. Strangely, it made no sound. It appeared that whoever was inside this huge 100-foot object was coldly studying the two humans on the ground. Unable to bear their growing fear, the two men hid in some bushes close by. From the bush, they peered at the object, almost expecting it to come for them. Fortunately, it did not move. As they watched with fear, they noticed another strange event. Not so far away, they saw a jet approaching the unidentified object. It circled it a couple of times, but there was no confrontation from the jet. As the drama continued, one of the men took out his camera and held it to the sky. With shaky hands, but a determination to capture what he was seeing, he quickly took 6 shots of the strange aircraft. Suddenly, the oddly shaped vehicle began to silently ascend into the clouds before disappearing out of sight. Heaving a sigh of relief, the men backed away. They soon realized that they had something valuable. With this piece of evidence, there was only one place that could tell their story: the media. Shortly after the nerve-wracking episode with the UFO, the two men went to the local papers, the Daily Record, to report what they had seen. When the papers demanded some form of evidence, the men hurriedly handed over the original negative films to them. This was the beginning of the 90s. There were no digital cameras to capture images instantly. As the men handed over the films to the papers, they returned to their lives. I'm not certain why they handed everything to the media, but they did. As the team at Daily Record inspected what they had received from the two men, they were shocked. This was beyond anything they had ever seen or covered as a story. Since they were unsure of how to proceed with these valuable items now in their custody, they decided to pass it on to the military. A few days after the episode with the two men, the newspaper house reached out to Craig Lindsay. He was the public relations officer for the Royal Air Force, or RAF, in Scotland at the time. That morning, they called him to inform him of something unusual that the two hikers might have stumbled upon. Craig, who was no stranger to such calls, asked for more details and eventually asked for the pictures they had with them. A few days later, he received a sealed parcel containing the requested items. Without much expectation, Craig tore open the sealed parcel. It took only a few minutes for him to realize that whatever he was looking at could not be ignored. He quickly got on the phone and called the Ministry of Defense in London to inform them about what he had in his hands. Initially, his counterparts in London did not want to take this seriously, as it wasn't the first time someone had reported some weird discovery. In any case, they asked Craig to send over the picture he had with him, so he faxed it to them. Just moments later, Craig's phone rang. The MOD requested further information about these pictures. For a people who had dismissed him only moments ago, this was quite surprising. He was asked to get in touch with the two hikers and extract every piece of information he could get from them. The Defense Ministry also asked for the original negative films. At this point, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, you know what's about to happen, right? Craig quickly got in touch with the media and asked for the negative films. He also got the phone number of the hotel where they were temporarily working and called the front desk. Fortunately, they were still around. Craig, at the time he gave this interview, sometime between late 2021 and early 2022, was now in his 80s. However, he seems to remember that the men spoke with an English accent. Armed with the details and proof he needed, Craig sent everything to the MOD. Upon receipt, the officials there told him to leave everything to them. Craig must have realized at this point that this was bigger than he imagined. Indeed it was. After a while, Craig had to report to London for an official meeting. Imagine his surprise when he walked into one of the offices and found a 3-foot image of one of the images splashed on the wall. Some of the other pictures were here as well. Perceiving his curiosity, the officials quickly told him that they had returned the original copies to the Daily Report. They also said although the pictures were genuine, they had no interest in further investigations. However, this claim did not appear to be true. For starters, it's hard to imagine that an image worthy of being studied by the MOD would suddenly be dismissed, especially after admitting the photos were not doctored. But this was not all. The newspaper house never published the story. Did the MOD truly return the films? If they did, was the media house warned not to run the story since it bothered on matters of national security? I cannot say for sure. However, the events that subsequently unfold reveal that this UFO sighting might have been one of the most significant findings in history. Following the defense minister's stance on the photos, Craig returned to his duty post. After his retirement, he left all he had seen and heard about the Callvine UFO behind, but kept something in his custody. The next time the pictures would be spoken about would be after 3 decades. Sometime around 2021, an English broadcaster and associate professor at the University of Sheffield Hallam University, David Clark, decided to investigate the strange photos from 1990. One of his primary goals was to find the 2 men who went hiking that day before taking the pictures. He put together a team for this, but his search would eventually lead him in a different direction. He ended up meeting Craig, and after 30 years, Craig revealed a shocking truth. Clark's desire to uncover the truth took him to the one man who saw it all happen. Craig, a much older man by this time, finally revealed something he had kept to himself all the while. It turns out that the RAF public relations officer did not hand over all the documents to the MOD. He kept one to himself. Clark's visit reawakened his interest in the long-forgotten case, and after some discussions, he handed over the one picture revealing the exact moment the strange aircraft from 3 decades ago was photographed to the university where Clark taught. Although this wasn't what Clark primarily set out to achieve, it was a big break all the same. Finally, there was some form of proof that something extraterrestrial had visited the United Kingdom a while ago.
Okay, so just say who you are and how you got involved in this.
Craig Lindsay. I was Public Relations Officer to the RAF in Scotland on the staff of the Air Office of Scotland and Northern Ireland. I was in the office one morning, the phone rang, picked it up, and it was somebody on the picture desk at the Daily Record saying that they'd got a story from a couple of guys who'd seen something in the air at Callvine, and would the RAF care to comment on it?
The voice you just heard is Craig's as he accepts an interview with Clark. There is a full interview where Craig pretty much lays out everything that happened from the moment he picked up that call in August 1990. Of course, I can't include everything in this video, but I must acknowledge and give a shout out to the disclosure team who put this together. The journey to this presentation of the last piece of evidence to Clark was a long one. Craig wondered for many years why the story never made the headlines. Every day he waited patiently for someone to ask him what he saw in the pictures, but the call never came. After his encounter at the Ministry of Defense's UFO desk headed by Nick Pope, other reports or rumors emerged. For instance, it is believed that MOD officials had allegedly gone to the Daily Report and confiscated all copies of the original documents. This has not been proven though, but the refusal of the newspaper house to publish this sensational story might just lend some credence to this rumor.
For many years, there was a blown up copy, poster-sized copy of the best photo on my office wall, on the office wall of the UFO project in the Ministry of Defense. And then when the Freedom of Information Act came in, one of the things that people were expecting and looking forward to was, well, we're going to see this photo that everyone's been talking about. And they didn't. It disappeared. And the Ministry of Defense said, we have no record of this photograph. What survived was a poor quality photocopy of a line drawing, a tiny little black and white thing. What was missing was the huge, full-size, color, spectacular image, the best UFO photograph ever taken. And the only UFO photograph ever taken that has survived a proper scientific analysis that declared this was a genuine image. There was no trickery. This was a real object, and it was big, and we in the Ministry of Defense did not know what this was.
For what it's worth, the body language of the Defense Ministry suggested there was indeed something they were hiding, or at least uncomfortable releasing to the public. This is because the United Kingdom belongs to a group of countries that agree the public should have access to secret documents after a specific number of years. This was in line with a resolution for the Freedom of Information Act, passed in 2002. By 2009, several secret files that featured strange sightings, UFOs, and other unusual occurrences were released to the public. Strangely, the files on the Callvine sightings were nowhere to be found. The public had waited for this moment to finally see the pictures that finally proved the existence of alien technology. Unfortunately, the MOD didn't release them. When queried about this, the officials simply replied that they had no idea where the pictures were, as it was no longer in their custody. What was so intriguing about these pictures that the military wanted no one meddling with them? There's no way to know this. However, Nick's account of what really happened following the Ministry of Defense receipt of the files fuels the suspicion that these were no ordinary pictures. Nick is an interesting character in this story. He headed the UFO desk at the time the Callvine sighting happened. As head of the UFO desk, it was easy to find hoaxes reported as extraterrestrial sightings. This happened as much as 80% of the time. In another 15% of the time, the things people claimed to have seen had little evidence to support these claims. Then there was the final 5%, where the team saw strange things that defied their logic and understanding. While they couldn't automatically classify these as alien technology or visitation, they also couldn't deny the possibility that these items came from some place not exactly from the Earth. The Callvine picture fell into the 5% group. After Nick's team tested the validity of the pictures using the photo analysts, the pictures were sent to the Joint Air Reconnaissance and Intelligence Center, or JARIC, for further analysis. This intelligence unit, among other things, are expert in imagery analysis. After their extensive testing, they came to the same conclusion. The photos were authentic and had not been tampered with in any way. Whatever it captured as an aircraft was indeed a solid airborne vehicle with advanced technology. When Nick spoke on his role as head of the UFO unit recently, he was still convinced that whatever built the technology of the noiseless diamond ship was not something his country was working on at the time. Nick came by his revelation when he and his boss visited an intelligence officer in the MOD. The officer told him in clear terms that whatever was in that picture didn't come from Russia or America. None of these countries had the technology for that unique plane. As Nick and his boss pressed the officer to tell them where the plane came from, he looked up, probably implying that it came from outside Earth. Despite these claims, the MOD said the UFO, or whatever the diamond-shaped aircraft was, did not pose any significant defense threat. Nick goes on to say these claims were the ministry's way of explaining things to the media, parliament, and any other nosy fellow. However, the presence of these unknown and possible visitors from outside our planet left them searching for answers. I guess this was the government's way of dispersing fears, rumors, or panic that could lead to a breakdown of law and order. This was not the first time that the government would be minimizing the potential impact of such sightings. In 1994, as many as 60 schoolchildren in the Zimbabwean town of Ariel insisted that they had been visited by aliens. But the world paid no attention and even said they were lying. But this video is not about them, because things were about to get really heated between two world powers. By the mid-90s, the Callvine pictures had begun to cause strained relationships between the United States and the United Kingdom. Both defense officials believed that there was a breach of diplomatic privileges. The Scottish government was convinced that the object was a specialized spy plane called a Harrier from the United States. If it wasn't a Harrier, it was a drone or some secret prototype plane. These arguments grew, especially when the United Kingdom discovered that the Americans were designing a high-powered stealth plane called the Aurora. With this knowledge about America's plane, the UK launched an inquiry, seeking to know if America was testing their aircraft in Scotland. The American military strongly refuted this. Eventually, this line of thought was dropped, preventing what may have led to dire consequences. The idea that this was the United States Harrier did not sound plausible. No records proved that their planes were in the area. Moreover, no pilot ever came forward to accept or deny their role in all this, although this can be chucked up to some secrecy code in the military. Interesting story, I must say. Uncovering this top-level secret looks like something from a Hollywood blockbuster. However, there are a few things about this story that I feel require some clarity. If you carefully followed this story, as I told you, you would notice I never mentioned the names of the two men who found and photographed these images. Who were they, and why have they never been found? Doesn't it sound a little too convenient that two men find something of this magnitude, but no one ever bothered to find out about their whereabouts today? In some accounts, Clark's team claims they found one of the men, tracking him down to Falkirk Village. However, for security reasons, the name was never revealed to the public. If this is true, did the MOD somehow find him and force him into some non-disclosure agreement? This was sort of confirmed when Clark met Craig. Craig, who was excited to finally meet someone who wanted to talk about what he had seen many years ago, presented the exact parcel he received that day. At the back of the picture was the name of the man who took the shots. However, even Clark is unwilling to release this detail to the public. He probably believes putting his name out there might bring him unnecessary attention from truth seekers. This has also been the position of the MOD. However, I find this difficult to accept. I mean, these men knew the implication of handing over evidence to the press. If they wanted anonymity, why did they give their names or have it written on the samples? Going by the Freedom of Information Act, the names of other UFO witnesses, addresses, and other details were released to the public. This makes me wonder why the identities of the two witnesses of the Callvine incident were not disclosed. What could the United Kingdom or Ministry of Defense be hiding? Again, I find it quite interesting that the men handed over all copies of their original documents to the papers. If this wasn't bad enough, why did the newspaper give every item to the MOD without keeping some as backup? Were they really interested in covering the story, or just too scared to run something controversial? Every worthwhile journalist understands the importance of protecting their sources, especially when such pieces of information are difficult to come by. Why would professionals hand over everything to the Defense Ministry? Were they threatened? This brings me to probably one of the strongest arguments against the Callvine sightings. Although the opinions of these photo observers that I'm about to mention do not carry much weight, there is a widely believed notion that these were not UFO pictures, but the reflection of a rock out of water. Of course, the idea is almost laughable, but many critics believe that was a cleverly taken photograph that proves this. If you allow your brain to play some tricks, the picture does look like the inverted image of the tip of a rock out of water. However, a close look at the plane flying beside reveals it is flying in an upright position. For the reflection theory to be true, that plane had to have been flying in an inverted position. To support this notion, a Reddit user posted this picture which almost looks like the UFO picture under consideration. It's a piece of rock and water. A careful study of the alleged UFO appears like a reflection in the water. However, the jet beside it deflates this theory, as it doesn't have a symmetrical alignment in the supposed water. Supporters of the UFO theory also believe that the reflection also fails, as they believe the area where the two men photographed this picture is dry. David Clark and his team visited this area during their investigation and took some pictures of the area, and from what they had, the area indeed appears dry. However, an aerial view of this spot reveals that this is not very accurate. This Google Map view reveals there is a body of water close by, called the Iraqti Water. In truth, this might not be the exact place where the photos were taken, but I just can't rule out the fact that there is water in the area. Again, others believe the government and MOD never made these documents public for a strange reason. A careful look at the photograph reveals another jet in the background. It is believed that this jet belonged to the American Air Force. If true, it was not supposed to be flying over the Scottish airspace, at least not without some clearance. The appearance of this jet was proof that the Americans were interfering on foreign soil. This is why the documents were never made public, as their release could lead to diplomatic rows between both nations. As for the diamond-shaped UFOs, it was considered a hoax. The real deal was the hidden jet, a Harrier. Just so you know, whatever information of the Callvine findings with the MOD will remain classified until 2076. This is to ensure that all military top brass involved in the approval of this supposed US special aircraft would be no more, unless of course they've had a dose of Methuselah's vaccine. The debate about what happened on that summer evening in Callvine continues. If a strange aircraft came into our airspace and the media or military denied it, that wouldn't be the first time. And it doesn't help matters that we don't have any information whatsoever of the original witnesses of the event. To be honest, I'm kind of stumped. If it was a hoax to cover military secrets, then how did the UFO-like plane Photoshop itself ever so perfectly without it being altered? I can understand the government doing all they can to hide military secrets, but how can you explain the UFO-like plane right next to the fighter jet? Do they just have a UFO contact on speed dial? I'm honestly looking for an answer, and if you have one, please leave it in the comments below. All these remind me of one story that keeps coming out despite the government's effort of shutting it down. It's one of the most believable UFO stories out there, and they come from unadulterated, unaltered kids. Remember the story I mentioned earlier about the Zimbabwean children who saw some strange beings and crafts land on their school? This is a link to the video, and what they revealed is even more shocking than this story. This is one case that truly proves that we are not alone in this universe.